The sound that stopped everything wasn't a gunshot or a scream. It was quieter than that, more devastating. It was a 12-year-old boy trying not to cry. March 1961, Paramount Studios, Stage 9. The set of All in a Night's Work was running 3 days behind schedule. The budget was bleeding, and the director was losing his mind. Joseph Anthony had built his reputation on delivering films on time and under budget. He directed successful Broadway shows, worked with major stars, commanded respect from crews who'd seen everything. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, none of that mattered. Because standing in front of 40 seasoned film professionals was a child actor who couldn't remember 3 words. Special delivery, Mr. Robbins. That was the line. 6 syllables. A paperboy's greeting. The kind of throwaway dialogue that gets written in 30 seconds and forgotten immediately after filming. Except Tommy Brennan couldn't say it. Take 1. Special delivery, Mr. Roberts. Take 2. Special delivery, Mr. Robertson. Take 3. Special delivery, Mr. Cont. A pause, a terrified blank, silence. Joseph Anthony's face went from pink to red to a shade of purple that made the cinematographer quietly check if the first aid kit was nearby. The director stood up from his chair, and everyone on set felt the temperature drop. Dean Martin wasn't supposed to be there. His call time wasn't for another hour. But he'd arrived early, as he often did, and was standing off to the side in his robe, coffee in hand, watching the kids struggle, watching the takes multiply, watching the director's patience evaporate like morning dew under a blowtorch. Cut. Anthony's voice was tight, controlled, the kind of controlled that meant he was about 5 seconds from detonation. Again. Tommy nodded. His hands were shaking. He was gripping the prop newspaper so hard the edges were crumpling. His voice came out small. Special delivery, Mr. He stopped. The name was gone, vanished. His 12-year-old brain, paralyzed by fear and the weight of 40 pairs of eyes, simply could not retrieve the word Robbins. That's when Joseph Anthony exploded. Are you stupid? The director's voice cracked across the soundstage like a whip. It's 3 words. A trained monkey could remember 3 words. My dog could remember 3 words. Tommy flinched, his face crumpled. He was trying so hard not to cry that his whole body was rigid. I'm sorry. Sorry? Anthony stepped closer. Do you know how much this production costs per minute? Do you know how many people are standing around right now waiting for you to do the simplest thing in the world? The crew looked away. Some stared at their shoes. Others busied themselves with equipment that didn't need adjusting. This was the part of the job nobody talked about, but everyone had seen. The moment when frustration boiled over and someone with power used it as a weapon against someone without any. Shirley MacLaine, Dean's co-star, was standing near the craft services table. She caught Dean's eye. He was no longer leaning casually against the wall. He'd set down his coffee. His expression hadn't changed. Still that sleepy, half-amused Dean Martin look, but something in his posture had shifted. Maybe we should take 5, the assistant director suggested quietly. We'll take 5 when I say we take 5, Anthony snapped. He turned back to Tommy. You know what your problem is? You're not focusing. You're lazy. You think this is playtime. You think you can just show up and... That's enough. The 2 words weren't loud. Dean Martin didn't raise his voice. He barely projected. But the entire soundstage heard him because every other sound had stopped. 40 people turned to look at the man in the bathrobe standing near the camera. Anthony spun around. Excuse me? Dean walked onto the set. Not rushed, not aggressive, just walking, like he was heading to the kitchen for a sandwich. I said, that's enough. Dean, I'm in the middle of directing here. No. Dean stopped about 10 feet from the director. You're in the middle of screaming at a child. There's a difference. Anthony's jaw tightened. This is my set. I run it how I see fit. Not anymore, you don't. The assistant director made a small noise, somewhere between a cough and a gasp. Nobody talked to directors like this, especially not during filming, especially not in front of the entire crew. Dean, I appreciate your concern, but this is between me and the actor. The actor is 12 years old, and you're tearing him apart over 3 words. Dean's voice was still calm, still measured, but there was steel underneath it now. So yeah, I'm making it my concern. Anthony tried to smile, tried to play it off. Look, sometimes you have to be firm with firm. Dean interrupted. You called him stupid. You compared him to a dog. That's not firm, that's cruel. The director's smile vanished. Dean, I've been directing for 20 years. I know how to handle actors. Then handle this. Dean pulled something from his robe pocket. The set phone, the one that connected directly to the studio executive offices. He held it up. I'm calling Hal Wallace right now, and I'm telling him you need to be replaced. The soundstage went completely silent. Replacing a director mid-production was catastrophic. It meant delays, reshoots, budget overruns, insurance claims. It was the kind of decision that ended careers. Anthony's face went pale. You can't be serious. Dean started dialing. Watch me. Dean, think about what you're doing. We're 3 days behind already. If you shut down production, then we're 3 days behind. I don't care. Dean held the phone to his ear. What I care about is that kid over there who's going to remember this moment for the rest of his life, and I'm not letting that memory be some asshole director telling him he's stupid. The phone rang once, twice. Anthony lunged forward. Wait, okay, just wait. Dean lowered the phone slightly, waited. The director took a breath, tried to collect himself. I got frustrated. It won't happen again. You're right. Dean's voice was quiet. It won't, because you're not directing this picture anymore. Dean, please, I have a family. I have a reputation. If I get fired from a Dean Martin picture, then you should have thought about that before you made a child cry. Someone on the production line picked up. Dean didn't break eye contact with Anthony. Hi, this is Dean Martin on stage 9. I need to speak with Hal Wallace immediately. The assistant on the other end stammered something. I don't care if he's in a meeting, Dean said. Get him on the phone now, or tell him I'm walking off his picture in the next 60 seconds. 30 seconds of silence. Then a click. Hal Wallace's voice came through, tight with concern. Dean, what's going on? I need a new director by tomorrow morning. What? Dean, we're in the middle of a... Joseph Anthony just spent 20 minutes verbally abusing a 12-year-old actor in front of the entire crew, called him stupid, compared him to a dog, made him cry. Dean's voice was flat, factual. So either you replace him or you replace me. Your choice. More silence. Then, put me on speaker. Dean held the phone out, pressed the speaker button. Hal Wallace's voice filled the soundstage. Untold, decisive. Are you there? Anthony cleared his throat. I'm here. Is what Dean described accurate? The director looked around. 40 witnesses. No escape. I got frustrated. The kid kept messing up a simple line and I didn't ask for context. I asked if you verbally abused a child actor on my set. Silence. Joseph, answer the question. Yes, barely audible. Then you're done. Clean out your office. I'll have someone escort you off the lot. Anthony's face went white. Hal, please. I've worked for you for... You just cost me my star and potentially millions in production delays. And worse, you did it by bullying a kid. We're done. Leave. The click of the phone disconnecting echoed through the stunned silence. Joseph Anthony stood there for a moment. Everyone watching. Everything he'd built. Reputation, relationships, future projects, crumbling in real time. He looked at Dean, not with anger, with something worse. Defeat. I hope you're happy, he said quietly. Dean didn't blink. I'm not, but that kid over there might sleep tonight, so it's worth it. Anthony left. The soundstage remained silent. Then slowly the crew started to move again. Conversations resumed. Equipment was adjusted. But everyone was watching Dean. He walked over to Tommy, who was still standing there, frozen, tears streaming down his face. Dean knelt down, eye level with the boy. Hey, Tommy couldn't speak. You're not in trouble, Dean said gently. None of this is your fault. I ruined everything. The words came out broken. You got the director fired because of me. No. Dean's voice was firm. I got the director fired because of him, because he forgot how to be a decent human being. That's not on you, but I kept messing up the line. So what? Dean smiled. You think I've never messed up a line? Tommy looked up, surprised. You? Dean reached into his robe and pulled out his script. Pages and pages covered in handwritten notes, crossed out lines, rewrites, annotations. You see this? This is what a professional script looks like, full of mistakes and corrections and second chances. Tommy stared at the script. The difference between a professional and an amateur isn't that professionals don't make mistakes, Dean said. It's that professionals don't let anyone make them feel small for making mistakes. You understand? Tommy nodded slowly. Good. Now, you want to know the real secret to remembering lines? The boy nodded again. Dean smiled. It's not about memorization, it's about connection. That line you can't remember. Special delivery, Mr. Robbins. You're treating it like random words, but it's not. It's you delivering something important to someone. So here's the trick. Picture Mr. Robbins. What does he look like? Tommy thought, old, grey hair? Perfect. And the name Robbins, what does that rhyme with? Robbins, like the bird. Exactly. So picture this. You're delivering a special package to an old man with grey hair, and there's a robin, a bird, sitting on his shoulder. Can you see it? Tommy closed his eyes, nodded. Now say the line. Special delivery, Mr. Robbins. Perfect. First try. Dean grinned. See? You're not stupid. You just needed someone to actually teach you instead of yell at you. Shirley MacLaine walked over. That was beautiful, Dean. He shrugged. Kid needed help. She lowered her voice. You know you just made a very powerful enemy, right? Joseph Anthony has friends all over this town. Then they're not the kind of friends I need. The new director arrived the next morning. His name was Arthur Hiller. Younger, calmer, known for working well with actors. He gathered the cast and crew before filming began. I heard what happened yesterday, he said, and I want to make something clear. On my set, we treat each other with respect. Period. I don't care if you're the star or the grip. Everyone matters. Everyone is valued. And if anyone has a problem with that, leave now. Nobody left. They shot Tommy's scene that afternoon. One take. The kid nailed it. When Hiller called cut, the crew applauded. Tommy stood there, stunned, as 40 people who'd watched him struggle the day before now celebrated his success. Dean caught the boy's eye from across the set, gave him a small nod. Tommy grinned. The story spread through Hollywood within days. Not through press releases or official channels, but through the network of crew members, actors, assistants, the people who actually made films. And the story they told wasn't about Dean Martin the star. It was about Dean Martin the person. He got a director fired to protect a kid, called the studio head right there on set, taught the boy how to remember his lines instead of just yelling at him. Other actors started calling Dean, privately, thanking him for setting a precedent, for showing that you could use power to protect instead of intimidate. Frank Sinatra called, "You crazy bastard, you know you just gave every director in town permission to be terrified of you." "Good," Dean said. "If they're afraid I'll get them fired for abusing people, they'll think twice before doing it." Sammy Davis Jr. called, "Man, I wish I'd been there. That must have been something." "It wasn't fun," Dean admitted, "but it was necessary." "You know what this means, right?" Sammy asked. "Every kid actor in Hollywood is going to want to work with you now. You're the safe guy." Dean hadn't thought about that, but Sammy was right. Over the next few years, Dean Martin became known as the actor parents wanted their children to work with. The one who'd protect them, the one who'd make sure the adults remembered to be adults. Tommy Brennan finished the film. His small role, 3 lines, maybe 2 minutes of screen time, wouldn't make him famous, but it changed his life anyway. 30 years later, in 1991, Tommy, now Thomas Brennan, a successful cinematographer, gave an interview to American Cinematographer magazine about his career. The interviewer asked about his first film experience. "It almost destroyed me," Thomas said. "I was 12, I couldn't remember a simple line, and the director tore me apart, made me feel like the stupidest person alive. But you kept acting, only because Dean Martin stopped it." Thomas's voice got quiet. "He walked onto that set, got the director fired, and then taught me that making mistakes is part of learning, not a character flaw, part of the process." "Did you stay in touch with him?" "No. I never even got to thank him properly. We finished the film and I never saw him again, but I think about him every single day." "Every day?" "Every day I'm on a set, working with a young crew member, and I have to decide, am I going to be the director who yells or the person who teaches? And I think, what would Dean do? The interviewer pressed, you really think about that? 30 years later? 30 years later, I remember everything. The way he knelt down to my eye level so I wouldn't feel small. The way he showed me his script covered in notes so I'd know even stars make mistakes. The way he called the studio head without hesitation, because protecting a kid mattered more than keeping the peace. Thomas paused. He saved my career that day. But more than that, he saved my sense of self-worth. And I've spent 30 years trying to pass that forward. When Dean Martin died in 1995, Thomas Brennan flew to California for the funeral. He stood in the back, just another face in a crowd of mourners. He didn't speak, didn't introduce himself to the family, just came to pay respects. As he was leaving, Dean's daughter Deanna noticed him crying. "Did you know my father?" she asked. Thomas nodded. "He saved me once." "What happened?" Thomas told her the story, the line he couldn't remember, the director who screamed, the phone call that changed everything. When he finished, Deanna was crying too. "He never mentioned it," she said. "We had no idea." "I'm not surprised," Thomas said. "He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was right." Deanna hugged him. "Thank you for telling me. People think they knew my father, but most of them only knew the image, the cool guy with the drink and the jokes. They didn't know this part. This part was the best part," Thomas said. After the funeral, Deanna started asking around, talking to crew members, actors, people who'd worked with Dean over the years, and she discovered something remarkable. There were dozens of Tommy Brennans. A young actress whose costume had malfunctioned during a scene, and Dean had stopped filming until she was comfortable. A grip whose father had died, and Dean had paid for the funeral without being asked. A stuntman who'd been injured, and Dean had refused to continue until proper safety protocols were established. A makeup artist going through a divorce, and Dean had quietly arranged for studio lawyers to help her pro bono. Story after story. Quiet interventions, private kindnesses, moments where Dean Martin used his power not to elevate himself, but to protect others. None of them had made the papers. None had been publicized. Dean hadn't done them for credit or recognition. He'd done them because, in his words, if you have power and you don't use it to help people, what's the point? The story of Tommy Brennan and the 3 words became legend in Hollywood, not because it was the most dramatic thing Dean ever did, but because it was the most revealing. It showed who he was when the cameras weren't rolling, when there was no publicity benefit, when doing the right thing meant making powerful enemies and causing expensive delays. It showed that Dean Martin understood something fundamental. The way you treat people when you have power over them is the truest measure of your character. Joseph Anthony never directed another major studio film. Word had spread about what happened on All in a Night's work. Not through official channels. Nobody blacklisted him formally. But directors, producers, actors, they all heard the story, and they all reached the same conclusion. If you're willing to abuse a child actor, you're not worth the risk. He died in 1985, largely forgotten by Hollywood. No retrospectives, no Lifetime Achievement Awards. Just a cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse authority with cruelty. Tommy Brennan. Thomas continued working in film for 40 years. He became known as one of the kindest cinematographers in the industry. Patient with young assistants, generous with knowledge, quick to praise, slow to criticize. And when asked about his philosophy, he always said the same thing. Dean Martin taught me that mistakes are not failures, they're opportunities to learn, to grow, to be better. And he taught me that power is not a weapon, it's a responsibility. He taught me that the true measure of success is not how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you. And most importantly, he taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop everything and say, that's enough. The soundstage where it happened, Paramount Stage 9, still stands. They've filmed hundreds of movies there since 1961. Thousands of actors have stood on that same floor. But according to some of the older crew members, there's a small tradition. When a young actor is struggling, when they're forgetting lines or feeling overwhelmed, someone will take them aside, and they'll tell them the story of the day Dean Martin got a director fired over 3 words. They tell them about the phone call, about the kneeling down, about the script covered in notes, about the lesson you're not stupid, you just need to be taught instead of yelled at. And then they say, that's the standard here, that's what we expect from everyone. Protection, not humiliation. Teaching, not tearing down. It's become a rite of passage, an oral tradition, a way of saying, you're safe here, you're valued here, you matter here, all because of 3 words a 12-year-old boy couldn't remember. All because Dean Martin decided that a child's dignity was worth more than a film schedule. All because one man understood that the word cut doesn't just stop cameras, sometimes it stops cruelty. And that's the story they don't tell in film school. That's the story that doesn't make the documentaries or the retrospectives or the clip shows. But it's the story that matters most, because anyone can sing a song, anyone can crack a joke, anyone can deliver a line, but it takes real character to kneel down to a child's eye level and say, you're not stupid, you just needed someone to teach you. It takes real courage to risk your career to protect someone who can't protect themselves. It takes real wisdom to understand that power is not about control, it's about responsibility. That's who Dean Martin was. Not the cool guy with the cocktail, not the Vegas showman with the effortless charm, but the man who stopped everything for a boy who couldn't remember 3 words and taught him, and everyone watching, that kindness is not weakness, it's strength, the truest kind.